Hi there, welcome to World Stories. I'm Sumi Somaskanda. Thanks for joining us. On this week's show, we take a look at how a cult classic is making inroads in Vietnam. We take a ride on the Moscow Metro and an orchestra like you've never seen it before. All that coming up. But first, we start in Mexico's capital, Mexico City, one of the largest metropolises in the world. Its population has jumped sevenfold in just half a century, and that growth has seriously impacted the city's water management. Mexico City is sinking at a record rate. The more groundwater that's consumed, the more the city sinks. That's made it hard to pump out wastewater, making the capital more vulnerable to floods. So 5 years ago, the government launched an ambitious project. With the help of the National Water Commission, CONAGUA, they're building a tunnel to help manage the water crisis and protect against floods. And as TV Educativa's Liliana Sotela shows us, the tunnel has some big benefits for agriculture too.
Every year, from June to October, the 20 million residents of Mexico City and the surrounding metropolitan area endure floods during the rainy season. One reason is that the city, founded 700 years ago, lies in a lake valley surrounded by mountains. In recent decades, socio-economic developments and exponential growth have overburdened the wastewater system. The situation has got worse, with the ground sinking at an average of 10 centimeters a year.
Here we have the difficulty that, on the one hand, we have to bring in fresh water, and on the other, drain off the wastewater and do it responsibly.
To solve the problem, a massive construction project was started in August 2008, the Túnel Emisor Oriente, the Eastern Drainage Tunnel, or TEO. The tunnel is 62 kilometers long, with a diameter of 7 meters. It can carry up to 150 cubic meters of rain and wastewater a second, doubling the current capacity.
Because this is a closed basin, there's a risk of flooding. To be able to live here, people have had to drain water out since the time of the Spanish monarchy.
It's the most important hydraulic infrastructure measure in the past 35 years in Mexico, and the largest of its kind worldwide. The tunnel has 24 ventilation shafts that extend to depths of 30 to 150 meters. It runs through 3 states: Mexico City, Mexico State and Hidalgo, where the wastewater treatment plant will be built in Atotonilco, completing the project.
To avoid flooding, we have to pipe residual water to Hidalgo, including rainwater. Until now, it's been untreated, without any purification procedures.
In dry periods, the plant will treat 35 cubic meters of wastewater a second, and larger amounts in the rainy season. It's the first time a project of this magnitude will be completed in one go.
This is a mega project. 30 cubic meters a second are the equivalent of 60% of the wastewater in the Mexico Valley metropolitan area.
This treatment plant is enormous. In an extreme situation, it can raise its capacity from 35 to 42 cubic meters a second.
The project should also aid the farming industry in Hidalgo's Mezquital Valley, where until now untreated water has been used in the fields.
We'll profit more than anything from clean water and food. Crops will no longer be irrigated with wastewater as they are now.
The project will directly benefit 700,000 people who work in the crop-growing areas of Tula and Alfajayucan, because for the past 100 years, fields there have had to be irrigated with wastewater. So for the first time, purified water will be available.
The project is already helping many families because it's giving lots of people work. Later it will help even more because we can use the water for all sorts of things, growing vegetables like carrots, pumpkins, beans, and much more.
Wastewater treatment takes place in 2 steps, a chemical and a biological purification process. For the latter, 30 digester tanks will be erected, 35 meters high. They capture methane gas and convert it to electricity.
The facility will supply 2/3 of its own electricity needs. So it's sustainable. And it avoids emissions of methane equivalent to about 360,000 tons of carbon dioxide a year.
In terms of units, the costs come to between 1.05 and 1.10 pesos per cubic meter. If you compare that to the costs of American or European treatment plants, it's 3 to 4 times lower. That's triggered great interest among foreign engineers and specialists who visited the project.
Altogether, the Eastern Drainage Tunnel and the Atotonilco treatment plant required investments amounting to about $4 billion.
Now, when we think of an orchestra, we think of violins, cellos, clarinets. We think of Mozart and Beethoven and Tchaikovsky. But it's out with the old and in with the new. In our next story, we take a look at how the laptop computer has become the newest orchestral instrument. With the right software, just tilting the laptop like this can produce all sorts of sounds. And when you put a lot of laptops together, you can make some beautiful music. That's exactly what some students at Princeton University in the U.S. have proven. Christina Alzesser with this report.
The laptop orchestra takes to the stage. Both the look and the sound are unusual. It might remind audience members of a spaceship, and there is certainly something futuristic about it.
It makes you look at music in a different way. When I was first involved in it, honestly, I thought this was like the weirdest thing. This was completely different from music as I knew it before as a classical jazz pianist.
So if you tilt it all the way to the right, it's going to get a lot quieter.
A rehearsal at Princeton University. Using a laptop as a musical instrument isn't as easy as you might imagine. You can't just press a button and go. The students have to compose every sound, every movement, and then program them. And they're not simply duplicating the sounds of conventional instruments.
What we're doing is we're exploring sounds that really cannot be heard in the natural world, or we are taking natural sounds and changing them in ways that you really can't imagine without hearing it.
We all know in the most general sense what an orchestra sounds like, because a composer hasn't invented every single instrument in the orchestra, whereas here, the composer invents every single instrument that's playing, decides every single type of sound.
But using laptops and tablets doesn't just change the sound of the music. It also alters compositional techniques.
Sometimes I start out with a musical idea and then I go program it. Sometimes I play at my computer and say, what would happen if I make this and this do? What would happen if I, bop my head and use that to control this other thing? And out of that, I get an aesthetic idea that becomes part of the composition.
It's a completely new experience for those who have dealt only with conventional music until now. But the laptop orchestra doesn't consist only of trained musicians.
The students in the ensemble are both musicians and programmers. Some of them are basically more musicians. Some of them are really coming from a programmer background, and they're sort of trying their hand at the other side.
That way, students who'd never even get into a classical orchestra also have the chance to make music.
We all spend tons of time on the computer. I think people just naturally want to make music. And I think it's totally natural to make music with this tool that we use every day.
Programming, composing, and performing music. In the laptop orchestra, the boundaries are blurred. Here, anyone can do anything. And if a natural sound is needed, there's always a violin to fall back on. A perfectly conventional wooden one.
I wonder what Mozart would think of that. Well, Muslims around the world are celebrating Ramadan, the Islamic holy month that involves fasting, prayer, and an emphasis on charity and self-reflection. In our next story, we head to Lebanon, where we meet Qasim Al-Farouk, a poet who has survived incredible adversity. His experiences have helped shine a light on the true meaning of Ramadan. Alan TV's Hanan Fadlala and Zaina Al-Haddad have more.
Poet Kazim Al-Farouk, originally known for his radio reports, later wrote mainly song lyrics. Through his own courage and faith, he was able to overcome the consequences of a dreadful accident in which he lost both legs towards the beginning of the Lebanese Civil War in 1975. Now he lives with his wife and 5 children in the countryside. How did he manage to make a new start after the accident?
With the war, everything came to a standstill. We lived in Beirut and suddenly found ourselves again in the village where we now live. I had experience making women's purses. Because there were no factories here, I got the idea of selling school and travel bags. So from the time I arrived from Beirut in 1982 until 2000, I had a kind of shopping center. I lived modestly. I was determined to take responsibility for myself after the accident and made quite an effort to go my own way. In 2000, after the events of that time, the country was in recession, so I reduced my center to a shop.
He never lost his will to live, even in the 1980s, shortly after the accident.
At the time, I sat there, my head in my hands, and dreamed of so many things. I dreamed of love, of success in life. I dreamed of just being a person and a brother to all people, no matter what the color of their skins or what country they came from. That was my wish. I didn't want anything more. I hadn't been let out of hospital yet, and my friends came to visit me, girls and boys. We spent lovely hours together. I listened a lot, and they told me all about themselves. It was a kind of comfort to me after what had happened. Then I began to write more and more. Writing is my real comfort and support to this day.
Friends of Kazim Al-Farouk, also known as Abu Salam, still support him in many ways. One of those friends is Atef Wahbi, a gifted flute player.
We've known each other forever. I knew him even before I began to play the flute. Those days I used to play a simple shepherd's instrument. I was living in the same village when Abu Salam had the accident. I visited him very often. He had many visitors. All his friends came along in the evenings. It was Abu Salam who gave me the confidence to start playing the flute.
He and his friends agree that Ramadan is the month of compassion and that fasting is the way to express gratitude to God. If you've done everything right, you've really earned the feast of sacrifice afterwards.
When you approach, the nights become lovelier. Greetings, Ramadan. Your nights are filled with joy. Welcome, Ramadan.
What is the message of poet turned philosopher Kazim Al-Farouk for Ramadan?
When you fast during Ramadan, you should do it for your God and not to show people around you that you're fasting. I don't like that. That's true for praying as well. You should do things from your heart. I want all people to get along with each other. I want all people to make an effort during this month. We should try to relieve suffering and see where help is needed. I wish this for all people, not just in Lebanon, but everywhere. And not just among Muslims, but among Christians and Jews. I want people to respect life and love. That's the kind of person I'm looking for. Why don't we treat each other with respect? We should do this even when we have differing opinions and aims. But there are things we have in common which we should build on. We shouldn't insist on the points that separate us, even if we have just 1 point in 10 in common. We should build on it together. Only then will we understand what it is to be human. Only then will we understand God.
A truly inspirational man. Now, time for a little nostalgia with a look at one of Italy's biggest cultural exports. Lambretta scooters conjure up images of vintage movies of Europe in the 50s and 60s. They were a cult icon, to say the least, and though the hype has died down, Lambrettas are still a symbol of style. In fact, in Vietnam, the vintage scooters have become a hot commodity among those who have an eye for old vehicles. VTV's Hoang Nhat Dang reports from the capital, Hanoi.
Lambretta is a line of motor scooter originally manufactured in Italy by Innocenti, starting in the 1940s. With its unique features and luxury design, Lambretta soon became the most popular scooter in Italy between the 1950s and 1960s, and it won the hearts of motorcycle lovers across the world. In 1972, Innocenti officially closed shop. To this day, however, there are still many clubs across the world devoted to the classic Lambretta scooter.
In Vietnam, now old Lambretta has become the luxury favorite of many people. Displaying more than 12 Lambrettas, the Heritage Inn is having the largest collection of old Lambretta in Hanoi. This is also the rendezvous of the Lambretta lovers in Hanoi. And now let's join me to have a close look at this collection.
Tung has a special love of the Lambretta. His collection now includes 17 old scooters produced in the 1950s and 60s. There are not many Lambretta scooters in Vietnam, and Tung traveled from north to south looking to purchase the scooters for his collection. In addition, he's constantly on the lookout for spare parts so he can maintain his collection in excellent condition. Despite the painstaking work of keeping his Lambretta collection, Tung's devotion to his hobby never wavers.
I am a designer by trade, and Lambretta charmed me with its beauty, its outstanding performance, and sophisticated designs.
This LD 150cc scooter was among the first models of Lambretta, manufactured more than 50 years ago by Innocenti. The scooter was imported from France with original parts and had been maintained in perfect condition since the date of manufacture. Using 3 gears and a 2-stroke engine mounted directly onto the rear wheel, the Lambretta LD 150 is called the Classic Lambretta. In contrast, the same series manufactured after 1960 is known as the Modern Lambretta. The scooters are very rare, and it's no small feat to find and maintain a Classic Lambretta.
It is really difficult to find an old Lambretta in Hanoi, as the old scooters were mostly used in the South before 1975. Beyond passion, I think Lambretta lovers need luck to pursue this hobby.
All 17 of the old Lambrettas in Tung's collection still run well. Tung often uses these scooters for daily life or travel, but maintenance is a real challenge because original parts are no longer made. Tung and his fellow scooter lovers enjoy getting together to share experiences in repairing their vintage motorbikes, and seeing the classic Lambretta scooters assembled here brings them a special joy.
I like the Lambretta scooter because it runs very smoothly. Its body is bigger than the modern scooters, and I especially love that classic design.
Tung holds a Lambretta exhibition every year at the Hanoi Heritage Inn to create a playground for Lambretta lovers in the region. Although the vintage scooter's heyday passed dozens of years ago, this line of scooter is still a legend to fans like Tung.
Thanks to VTV for that story. And finally today, more than 6 million people ride Moscow's underground system every day. An impressive number, especially for a system that's nearly 80 years old. But the metro in Moscow is more than a way to get around. Its stunning art and architecture are also a colorful tribute to the capital's rich history. RT's Svetlana Kurekina shows us the sights and sounds.
A piece of art hidden deep underground, marble, mosaic and sculptures, and trains roaring past. With 180 stations and around 7 million passengers on a typical weekday, Moscow Metro is one of the world's busiest. And reputedly the most beautiful. Opened during Stalin's rule in 1935, it displayed the best in Soviet architecture and was meant to impress. Plans of its construction had been drawn up in Tsarist times, but the outbreak of the First World War and then the revolution put them on hold. In the 1930s, the Communist Party took the project close to heart, even asking the London Underground for advice. And from the outset, the metro became the place of countless urban legends. Take the Ring Line. It wasn't in the original plan, but it's believed that when a group of engineers was reporting to Stalin on the construction progress, he put his coffee cup on the drawings, leaving a brown circle. Taking it as a sign of Stalin's genius, the engineers ordered the construction of the Ring Line. And indeed, it's always printed in brown on metro maps. One of the oldest and most popular central stations is Ploshchad Revolyutsii, or Revolution Square. Opened in 1938, it's lined with 76 figures of soldiers, workers and farmers who are said to come alive at night time. And touching the foot of this bronze student is thought to cure a broken heart. Meanwhile, real students believe that rubbing the noses of the border guards' dogs is a guarantee of passing an exam, and everyone else does it to have good luck. No wonder they're so well polished. Another fine example of Stalinist architecture is Mayakovskaya, named after the poet of the Russian Revolution Vladimir Mayakovsky. Look up to enjoy the ceiling mosaics depicting a bright day under the Soviet sky. But if anyone tells you that the fine metal strips lining the station's columns were once intended for the frame of the world's biggest Soviet airship, don't believe it, it's just another legend. At 33 meters deep, during World War II, Mayakovskaya served as an air raid shelter. In 1941, it hosted a ceremony to mark the 24th anniversary of the revolution, with Stalin himself making a speech. Several years ago, the station had a new exit added. In line with the celebrated Soviet-era design, its ceiling is decorated with a mosaic and some of Mayakovsky's poetry. And here's perhaps the most ornate station, Novoslobodskaya. Opened in 1952, it's decorated with marble from the Urals and stunning stained glass windows. One of the station's artworks caused much controversy, though. The baby on this mosaic, called Peace Throughout the World, used to look at none other than Stalin. But during the rule of Nikita Khrushchev and his de-Stalinization campaign, Uncle Joe had to go. Khrushchev was also apparently outraged by the barefoot woman. "Don't we have enough shoes for everyone in the USSR?" he was said to scream, and so he ordered to remove the mosaic altogether. But the station's architects saved it, covering the picture with a fake wall. Only after Khrushchev's fall from power in 1964 could it be restored. So do take a ride here. You're sure to enjoy the views. Svetlana Kurekina, Primetime Russia, RT.
Well, that's all for this week's edition of World Stories. From all of us here, our reporters and partner stations around the world, thanks for watching. To watch more episodes, head to our website. That's dw.de/World Stories. We'll leave you with this week's Picks of the World. See you next time with more World Stories.